All right, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. I'm Dr. Marie Hollowaychuk, and I will be the host and the speaker for today's webinar session. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to those of you who are attending live, and hello as well to everybody who is watching the recording. For anybody that does have to duck out today, this will be recorded and posted to YouTube, so you will have access to this if you cannot stay for our entire session. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started here today. Our webinar today is sponsored by Reviving Veterinary Medicine, and we are a resource hub dedicated to improving the mental health and well-being of veterinary professionals around the world. I will talk about it at the end of our session, but we have podcast episodes, blog posts, downloads, one-on-one coaching, and lots of different resources available for you. So if you want to be sure to know when we're having webinars such as these, workshops, or other new resources, please do follow us on social media. And we drop a podcast episode every other week or twice a month, so you can definitely subscribe to the podcast as well. A quick reminder that this webinar is approved for 1 hour of American Vet Med Association CE credits. So this is an AVMA webinar. I have an AVMA, blah, blah, blah. I am an AVMA well-being facilitator. And so I am sharing this content from them for all of you today. There will be instructions at the end of the webinar in terms of how you can get your CE credit, even if you are watching the recording. As long as you watch the recording and you do what is required to log your CE, you can qualify for CE as well. So please make sure you stay on the entire session in order to claim your credit. A few housekeeping items briefly before we get started. Please make sure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation just to avoid any distracting background noises. Please keep your cameras off unless you choose to turn your camera on and ask a question. I am going to be monitoring questions in the chat, so please feel welcome to include your questions there. And we will have time dedicated at the end of the session to address any additional questions that come up. This is meant to be interactive, so I will be inviting you to comment in the chat. I would love for you to start that now by popping into the chat where it is that you are watching from. It's always so fun to see the geographical distribution. Very often we are spread across Canada and the United States and sometimes over the pond as well. So welcome again to everybody. If you do experience any technical difficulties, again, please do feel welcome to reach out and we can go from there. Yeah, so I see everybody, so across Canada, Edmonton, Dartmouth, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Wembley, Alberta. Welcome everybody. It's so glad to have you all here. Ohio, so we have the US representing, and I'm sure there will be some more joining us as well. And of course, hi to Katie tuning in from here in Calgary, where I am as well. New Jersey, Michigan, lots of representation. So thank you so much, everybody. It just warms my heart to see so many of you tuning in. And if you find this information helpful, please do feel welcome to share it with a friend or a colleague. I will be reaching out to all of you via email, everyone who registered, to share with you the recording link so that you can distribute that to others as well. And of course, always recommend that others take advantage of our resources too. Okay, so let's dive into the content. Our topic for today is managing stress, controlling the controllables. And I opted for this particular topic for the month of April because April is National Stress Awareness Month. So this is a month dedicated to recognizing all about stress, how we can manage stress, and the things that we can do to mitigate it. And so you'll see that the caption here for this AVMA content is strengthening workplace well-being through effective communication and connection. So much of how we manage stress is in our response to the stress that comes up. There's no getting away from stress in the work that we do as veterinary professionals, but oftentimes our well-being is impacted by our response to stress. How do we communicate to others? How do we take care of ourselves? What are the positive coping strategies that we can do to mitigate those negative ramifications of stress? And we're going to talk through all of that today. So this content would not be possible without the American Vet Med Association. So the AVMA has tons of well-being resources. If you aren't already taking advantage of those, I really highly recommend that you do. The link is actually avma.org/wellbeing. I think there's a typo on this slide. And all of this content is actually sponsored by Merck Animal Health. So Merck Animal Health, as many of you know, does surveys looking at veterinary and veterinary team well-being every other year. And you can access those research study results and other well-being resources at their website, which is vetwellbeing.com. So for those of you who have not met me before, once again, my name is Dr. Marie Hollowaychuk. I am a board certified veterinary emergency and critical care specialist, and I've been in the veterinary space my whole life. Both of my parents were veterinarians. I have been a vet now for more than 20 years, and I have a lot of experience in different practice venues, I'll say. So I spent time in general practice, obviously specialty and emergency practice, academia, and industry. And so I bring a wealth of experience to these sessions, which really are meant to be evidence-based with practical and tangible tools that you can immediately take away and integrate into practice. So I am CEO and founder of Reviving Veterinary Medicine, and I spend a lot of my time outside of clinical practice doing keynote speaking, one-on-one coaching, and content creation, really to spread the word around mental health and well-being. So by the end of our session today, I hope that all of you will be able to define stress, to define the illusion of control, some very important fundamental information when it comes to stress, to identify a key modifiable factor in your work-related stress. So what can you manage and modify on your own? And to compare and contrast two types of coping methods. So we're going to get deep into a couple of different options for positive coping strategies. So let's start by defining stress, right? Stress is what happens in your brain and in your body when something you care about is at stake. Okay, so that is one way to define stress. This stress comes from the work of Kelly McGonigal. Some of you have probably come across Kelly's TED Talk, How to Make Stress Your Friend. Highly recommended if you haven't watched it. She also has a book called The Upside of Stress, Why Stress is Good for You and How to Get Good at It. So I'm going to invite you to share in the chat what happens to you in your mind and in your body when you experience stress. What comes up for you? Just pop a few things in the chat. And as you're popping those things in the chat, I want to share for you this notion that stress can be a good thing. Okay, so there's a lot of research looking at some different terminology, and many of you have probably seen a little bit of a bell-shaped curve when it comes to stress. Okay, so not enough stress and things get boring. Nothing happens, nothing changes. The right amount of stress, or what we call eustress, and now we're getting somewhere, right? Now we're being productive. Now maybe we feel a little bit excited and energized. Too much stress, and now we're feeling distress. And chronic distress is obviously going to lead to discomfort. And I'm seeing some of the things that you're talking about in the chat here. And chronic unmanaged stress is going to lead to burnout. Okay. So the premise of Kelly McGonigal's work is that stress can be a good thing. We don't want to hide from stress. We don't want to run away from stress. In fact, there's research studies that show if you put small organisms in an environment where they have zero stress, they're going to die. They need some degree of stress to grow, to live, to thrive. And we as human beings are the same thing. So we want to recognize and embrace life is going to have stress. Our work for sure is going to have stress. And maybe that's not such a bad thing if it's in moderation. Now, when I look through the chat here and I see your comments, what happens in your brain and your body when something you care about is at stake and causing you stress? Andrea says stomach ache, poor sleep. Shannon, tension in the body and anxiety. Claire says loss of focused thinking. Teresa, elevated heart rate. Candace, same thing, heart beats faster and then hyper focus. So a lot of us, we do experience that good that comes from stress. It's like, okay, I got to get stuff done. I'm going to be productive here. And Catherine says irritability. So you can see that when we think about stress, a lot of us do tend towards the negative, right? We think about those bad things, right? Our stomach churning, the headaches, the muscle tension and tightness. And if we back it up just a little bit in that early period of stress, or when we have the coping strategies to manage our stress, it can actually serve us well. It can drive us to action. It can make us productive. It can help us to focus and so on. Okay. And so just a little bit of an understanding and maybe perhaps a bit of a reframe around what stress really means. Now, again, we talked about it and recognize that a lot of the indicators we listed in the chat do tend to skew more towards the negative, but there are a lot of positive indicators that something you care is at stake. And again, I want you to think about stress from a positive perspective from time to time, right? The fact that we care about this so much that it's causing a physical and mental reaction in our mind and body tells us, okay, like it's going to drive us to action. It tells us, I care about this. This is important. I need to do something, right? And so again, there's many physiologic and evolutionary reasons why we have those stress responses. Now, again, we want to keep everything in check. We don't want this to go overboard to the point where we are not able to manage it. Now, a very important key thing to recognize as well is explained on this slide. The impact of perception on human stress is the key factor. So whether or not stress is perceived as good or bad has little to do with the stress itself and more to do with how we perceive it and how we respond to it. Right? So you can have something that comes up. I'll use a personal example. So I am getting ready to move 3 hours away to a city where I grew up. Okay, I'm in Calgary currently, and I'm going to be moving to outside of Edmonton to be closer to my family. Thinking about the moving is so stressful, okay? Thinking about the packing, the boxes, the movers, the timeline, the cleaning, the prepping, and all of that is stressful. But when I think about what I'm going to do to prepare for that, right? I think about, okay, I need to take action. I need to probably make some lists. I need to contact some moving companies. I need to start going through my belongings and getting rid of things I don't need to move, et cetera, et cetera. That is going to have a big impact on my overall perception of the stressful situation of moving, right? So, how do you perceive the stress and what do you do to respond to it? Now, a lot of us, when we think about stress in veterinary practice, what do we think about? We think about clients, right? My clients cause me stress. My clients need to be nicer. If clients would just be more patient, be kinder, be nicer, not complain, my life would be without stress. So I'm going to ask you to complete this metaphor in your head. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Okay, this is where we talk about this illusion of control. Okay, so control means to direct or influence the behavior of yourself or others to do what you want. Okay, so we're directing or influencing the behavior. That is our control. And control is one of those things that many of us grasp for during times of stress. Right? I want to be able to control the situation, right? Again, for me with the move, like I have to be able to control what the movers are going to do and, control when the moving truck is going to get to where it needs to go and control when my house is going to get sold and all of these different things, because that gives me the sense of power. That takes away the sense of ambiguity or uncertainty about what the outcome could be because there's something at stake, right? So control in the horse metaphor is leading the horse to water. I have control over the horse and that I can lead the horse to water. The illusion of control is overestimating our ability to use our direction or influence to produce a desired outcome or to make others behave in a certain way. So again, with the move, I can't control what the movers do, right? I can influence them, I can direct them, I can say, hey, this is what I'd like, this is what I need. But at the end of the day, they're going to do what they're going to do, right? Same thing with our clients and same thing with the horse. We can't make anybody do anything. And so when it comes to stressful situations that involve other people, our team members, our clients, whomever it is in our life, our partner, our family, we can't focus on making them change. Instead, we want to focus on ourselves, right? We can't control others. We can't control outcomes, but we can learn, if not already there, to control ourselves. Okay. That is really the key takeaway here and what we're going to focus on. So, when we think about negative responses to stress, right, we think about something called reactivity, right? So, this is our reaction to the stressful situation. And it's really the intensity and length of our emotional response to the stress, right? To put it again into the horse analogy, this is the degree to which you are bothered that the horse won't drink, or the degree to which you are bothered that your team members aren't picking up their slack, or that clients aren't being nicer, or whatever it is. And, I think about a coaching call that I had recently where my client said, I'm just so tired of people not doing XYZ. And I just wish that people would do XYZ. And it kept coming up in the conversation. And we kept going back to the sentiment that, yeah, I wish those things too. Everybody wishes those things. I wish people were kinder and nicer and more patient all the time. But it's a fleeting thought for me because the reality is I can't control it. So why am I fixating on it and letting it bother me? Because I have zero control over that. I can only control myself. Okay. That is the modifiable key factor in your work-related stress is your reactivity. How do you respond? So we can take on different strategies to lower our reactivity. Mindfulness is a great example. Noticing when our body is tightening and our mind is going and our jaw is clenching and we want to, scream at somebody, and taking a minute, taking a breath and pausing before we react. So that's just one way that we can do that. We're going to talk about some other strategies as well. But at the end of the day, the key thing to remember here is that lowering your reactivity is going to reduce your stress and burnout. And you'll see a reference at the bottom of the screen here by Mary Beth Spitznagel and her colleagues. And so they did a study looking at individuals' response to client-related stress. And if individuals can participate in acceptance and commitment training program, which is basically surrendering control over our clients. Like, yeah, our clients can make us feel angry and, or we feel angry in response to our clients and we can feel frustrated and all of these things can happen. But if we can take a step back, recognize we can't control our clients, we can only control our responses, that actually showed a reduction in stress and burnout among veterinary healthcare teams. So there is research to demonstrate that this is effective. And reactivity is actually more important than the frequency of stressful events. So it hasn't been shown that the more and more and more and more stressful events is going to cause more stress and burnout. What has been shown is that it is your reaction to those stressful events that leads to stress and burnout. You could have a lower number of stressful events, but if your reactivity is up here, that is still going to lead to distress and to burnout. So really important to recognize that. And at the end of the day, the fix for our stress in veterinary practice is inside out, leading from within. How do I want to behave? How do I want to respond? Not looking to others to change themselves so that then I can feel better. Okay. So, one of the other key things that has come up in research over the last couple of years as well comes from the Merck Animal Health Veterinary Wellbeing Study. This was the third study that was done a few years ago now. And what the researchers found is that having a healthy coping method was the most effective against experiencing the most effective defense against experiencing serious psychological distress. So if you have a healthy coping mechanism, it almost doesn't matter what stress is thrown your way. The chances of you moving into serious distress is much lower and buffered. So let's talk about coping methods, right? These are the skills that we use to deal with stress. And they tend towards two different categories. We've got our unhealthy coping mechanisms. These feel great in the short term, right? Going home and vegging and watching, binge watching TV, or having a glass of wine or several glasses of wine when you get home from work, or overeating, right? Lots of different things that feel good in the moment, but long term, they don't help our mental health and well-being. Okay. What we want to tend towards are healthy coping strategies. These lead to long-term gains, but they don't necessarily feel good in the moment, right? Things like doing some stretching, going for a walk, booking a counseling appointment, making a healthy meal. I mean, none of these things sound super sexy and fun to me, but when we take a step back and we look at them, at the end of the day, these things are going to boost our resilience. They are going to build up that coping muscle that allows us to have less reactivity to stress. Okay. And there's two main forms of healthy coping strategies that we're going to break down today: solution focused and emotion focused. So let's go through these different ones. So solution focused coping is essentially any coping strategy that we use to resolve the root cause of the stress. So for example, let's say that you have a toothache, right? You can journal about your toothache. You can meditate about your toothache. You can go for a walk and think about your toothache. It's not going to fix your toothache. All great coping strategies, but they wouldn't be considered solution focused. To help your toothache, you probably have to book an appointment with your dentist. That is going to be solving the root issue. So when we think about solution focused coping, we think about asking for help or setting boundaries. And I know none of these things are easy for us. I struggle with these things too, right? I am a hyper independent person and I still struggle with asking for help. I'm getting better at it, especially as a single mom, but I have to work at it. Same thing with boundaries. So we're going to break each of these down. So asking for help, why is this so uncomfortable for us as veterinary professionals? I think there's a lot of reasons, and I'd be interested to see what you think if you feel like sharing in the chat. I think for many of us, we are so entrenched in this caregiving role. We feel like I am so used to being the giver that it feels really weird to be the receiver. Right? I'm so used to helping others that maybe it feels like a weakness or that there's something wrong with me if I need to ask for help or if I can't do something on my own. Catherine says, I think because we are driven type A people, we are used to solving our own issues and other people's issues. And I 100% agree. We tend towards really just having that leaning towards doing everything ourselves. Okay. I think some of us too were afraid that we're going to be a burden on somebody else, or that what if we ask somebody and they say no, right? Then what? So I think all of these things play into it. And I think at the end of the day, we have to recognize that there is so much positive research around asking for help and receiving help. So you'll see some of the resources that are listed at the bottom of the slide here. Just to kind of touch on a few things. First of all, being on the receiving end of someone asking for help and knowing that you can help them is actually a well-being booster. right? Think about it. Think about one time that a friend came to you and was like, oh my gosh, I'm super stressed out. I have to go and run this really important errand, and my dog's going to be, at home for 12 hours. I just really need somebody to let out my dog for a walk, in the middle of the day so that they're not home alone for 12 hours. And you say, well, hey, like, I'm happy to come by and walk your dog. And they're like, oh my gosh, that would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. How does that feel? It feels great, right? We like helping others. We like dropping food off, when somebody needs meals, or, running an errand for somebody, or listening to somebody, especially those we care about. Right. And so recognize that there is this symbiotic relationship. It's not going to be all the time that people are going to be able to say yes, but when someone can say yes to helping you, it can be a game changer for both of you in the relationship. So I think we need to step away from believing that we are a burden when we're asking others for help. Candace says high performers as colleagues and that toxic mindset of why can't I figure it out myself? Yeah. So we definitely are programmed to be high performers, to not need help, to just push through. And maybe a little bit of like a culture of, well, what do you mean you need help? Like, what do you mean you don't have the answers? And so, yeah, I 100% agree. I think that that's right. And I think that that is why this can be so challenging for us. But again, really important to recognize that this is a crucial solution focused strategy for stressful situations. Even if it isn't getting someone to do something for you, but maybe the ask for help is, hey, I'm recognizing I probably need to connect with a mental health professional. I would benefit from that. Who do you use for your counselor? Or could you recommend someone to me? Or what has worked for you? Sometimes asking for help is often just asking for perspective, for advice, for options, for suggestions, right? And so think of it as just as you would ask someone for help around a case, you can ask someone in your life for help solving a problem as well, because it still has the intention of solution focused support. Okay. So I want you to take a moment. We're going to do an exercise here. So this is a social support network questionnaire. So if you have the handout that I emailed to all of you, you can write on there. You can pull up a file, a blank Word document on your computer. You can grab a piece of scrap paper. You don't have to write these statements down. I just want you to write down the numbers from 1 to 9 on the paper. So the purpose of this practice is that you can list up to 6 people for each question, but you don't want to list the same person for more than 3 numbers. Okay? So I want you to read through these different statements. The first statement is not including yourself. List all the people 10 and older who live in your household. Okay, list all the people 10 and older who live in your household. And then question number 2, when you go out of town, who do you ask or could you ask to watch your house, right? Is it a neighbor, a family member, a friend, a colleague, right? Up to 6 people that you can list there. Then number 3, with whom do you talk about decisions related to your work? Classmates, colleagues, your boss, your manager, your coworkers, right? Up to 6 people. Okay, I'm going to stop talking for just a moment and I'm going to let you work through all of these prompts, and just give me a thumbs up in the chat when you've completed the exercise. And we'll talk about the importance of this. Remember, as you're going through this, you don't want to list the same person more than 3 times. Just a couple more minutes for this exercise. Thumbs up when you're finished. Awesome. Andrea's done. Thanks, Andrea. We'll wait for just a few more of you to finish. Catherine's done. Candace, awesome. Okay. So you can probably imagine the significance of this particular exercise, and I recognize that some of you may be finishing up. I'll invite you just to pause where you are. You can certainly come back to this exercise. I do think this is a really important reflection for all human beings to work through. This exercise in particular has been used in workshops to support individuals who are experiencing burnout and compassion fatigue, and it is meant to highlight the degree of social network that an individual has. So I'm not going to ask you to share it in the chat, but I want you to count the total number of people in your list. Okay. This can include same people. Okay. So, for example, if you had, let's say your partner was listed 3 times, you count them 3 times. Okay. So count the total number of people that you listed in here and the number that you want to have a minimum of, according to the researchers, is 15. Okay. So 15 on this list of 9 prompts is considered the minimum that a person needs to be able to mitigate stress in a profession that is prone to burnout and compassion fatigue. The research is clear, okay? We need other people in our lives, right? Human beings are social individuals. We cannot survive on our own. We need other individuals. It has been that way forever. And in a world that is more digitally connected than ever before, we are more socially disconnected than ever before. In fact, the Surgeon General in the US named recently loneliness as an epidemic, worse than smoking. Okay. We need to make sure that we know who we have in our lives that we can count on and reach out to during times of stress. Whether again, it's moving, it's you're worried about something, you have an emergency and you need financial support, you're going away and you need someone to watch your house. All of these things, I think we underestimate the importance of these things. And so going through this exercise is a reminder of either A, you've got a lot of people in your life that you can count on, and there's probably people in your life who similarly count on you. And B, if there aren't, how do we start to build that social support network? So this really is a muscle, just like many other muscles, when it comes to asking for help. I mentioned it before and I'll say it again. There is a lot of science behind the benefits of helping. People want to help. This fills up other people's buckets, okay? So bear that in mind. This is, again, I'll refer to it as a symbiotic relationship where you get the help you need and somebody feels good knowing that they can help you, okay? Make asking a habit. Start small. Okay, so maybe it's as small as you got your hands full of groceries and you're leaving the grocery store and the automatic door isn't opening. So you ask someone, hey, would you mind grabbing the door for me? Right? Or you get on an airplane to go on your next trip and you've got a really heavy bag and you say to somebody, hey, could you lift this into the overhead compartment for me? Right? Starting with small asks for help and then building from there to those big asks like, could you pet sit my dog? Or, could you drive me to this appointment or whatever it might be? You also want to make sure that the ask is clear, right? This is the important thing. And the phrase informed consent is here, meaning people know what they're signing up for, right? So we want to make sure that the ask is clear. Here's what I need from you so that it's clear that somebody can say, yeah, I can do that. Or no, that's not going to work for me. Now, this statement, be curious about rejection, refers to the fact that people are going to say no. There's going to be people that don't have time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the skill set. For whatever reason, they can't help you in that moment. Be curious about that rather than feeling rejected and sitting in that place of, I don't know why I asked, I've got nobody that can help me. To wonder, gosh, they must be really busy, or maybe they're too overloaded in their own life that they don't have the bandwidth to help me right now. Whatever it is, get curious about what could be the issue and recognize it probably has nothing to do with you, right? And also be curious about your response to that, right? Try to flip into a place of, if they can't help me, I wonder who else I can ask, right? And you move on from there. We also want to practice discernment and help seeking, right? There is the importance of something called person task fit. We want to be mindful about what we're asking and who we're asking it of, right? Is there a risk of harm to the person helping us or to the relationship with this person? I think another thing to really think about, excuse me, importantly as well, is are you looking for someone to fix something for you, or are you just looking for their advice, their help, so that you can fix it, right? This is something that comes up often in relationships where we might be venting to somebody, and really all we want them to do is listen and maybe give a little smidge of sympathy and advice. But we don't want them to go into fix it mode where they're like, oh, let me do this and you should do that, right? So again, be clear. Be clear about what you're asking for. I think there's also, we want to be mindful of the degree of tolerance for helper bias or lack of skill. So, what I mean by that is there are individuals who really always want to be the helper, even though they may not be the right person for the job, right? And so we've got people, I'll do that, I'll do that, I can do that, I can do that, but they're really not the person that is best suited. So be mindful of that as well with your discernment. Degree of tolerance for breaches in confidentiality. So you might have an individual that if you ask them for something, that it's probably going to, spread like wildfire for other people, to other people. I'll use the example of me with the move, right? So I have been utilizing my parents who live in the city that I'm moving to help me find a home in that city. And knowing that I was going to be asking them for this help, I also knew that pretty soon other people in our family were going to find out that I was moving. And sure enough, that happened. So again, if you're being mindful about who you're asking for help, because knowing that they are helping you and they're probably going to be telling others they're helping you, that is going to spread the word. And maybe that's not something that you want. And then again, the ability to set and maintain boundaries is so very important, right? To be clear about what exactly is it that I need and what exactly is it that I'm going to do versus what is another person's responsibility. And we're going to talk more about that because the second thing that we think of when we think of solution-focused coping strategies is boundaries. Now, I want to be clear here. Boundaries are not something you ask someone else to do or not to do. That is not a boundary, right? Boundaries are also not necessarily permanent. You might have boundaries during certain seasons of your life and times in your life, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's forever and ever. The other thing that boundaries are not is consequence free. I am a huge advocate for boundaries. I talk about boundary setting boundaries all the time. I have an online program dedicated to boundaries. And the reality is the reason I have all those resources is because setting boundaries is hard. And why is it hard? Because setting boundaries often has consequences. And it's not to say those consequences should make you not set the boundary. It's just that going into boundary setting, you need to be mindful that people might be upset, that people might push back, that people might be resistant, right? There can be consequences. And we need to realize that going into it, knowing that this is hard. And there probably is going to be some quote unquote fallout as the result of my boundaries. Okay. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So boundaries do not sound like this. You can't talk to me like that. You need to hire more help and address your burned out staff. You need to understand that we triage patients in order of severity. You should respect my time. Okay? You can't email me on the weekends. Do you see the trend here? Why are these not boundaries? Because going back to what we said in the beginning, this illusion of control, you are asking other people to think or do certain things, and you don't have control over that. These are not boundaries. These are words that are probably going to inflame the other individual because nobody likes being told what to do. Okay? So many of us default to these, what we feel are boundaries, and recognize, you know what? Yeah, this isn't working for me. I've tried telling my clients to be nicer. We even have a sign in the waiting room that says, be nice or you will be asked to leave. How's it working for us? Maybe not so good, right? So what can we do differently? Okay. Here's what boundaries are. It goes back to you. You have control over you. Boundaries are something you do or don't do. The unit of change is you. For example, if this happens, I will fill in the blank. Or if this happens, I won't fill in the blank. Boundaries are essential. I say this all the time. Boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships. We need to have boundaries. For those of you who are watching who are leaders, practice owners, practice managers, and so on, you need healthy boundaries in your relationships at work as well, right? Boundaries tell others how we expect to be treated and what we will do in the event that we aren't treated that way. Boundaries tell people what we need and what the consequence will be if we don't get what we need. That's what we're doing when we're communicating boundaries. We are such empathy givers and compassion givers in this profession. And if we empathize and empathize and empathize without any stop or limit to our empathy, right? That can result in self-destruction. So I use the example of, or I use the definition of empathy to explain this. We have three different types of empathy. We have cognitive empathy, where I can see what a person is experiencing and I can name the emotion. That person is angry. That person is frustrated. That's cognitive empathy. Then we have emotional empathy. That person is angry and now I'm feeling angry. That person is frustrated and now I'm frustrated. Emotional empathy is taking on the emotion as if it's yours. And that's not a healthy boundary, right? We want to practice empathic concern. I see that that person is angry and I want to do something to help, but their anger is not my anger. Okay? That's the difference there. So here's an example of a boundary, and I'll be clear about what the boundary actually is. If you don't make these three specific improvements by the end of the quarter, I will give you an unsatisfactory review and place you on probation. It is I will give you an unsatisfactory review and place you on probation that is the boundary, right? Because you can't control what the other person does in terms of these improvements. You can only state what you will do or do not do. Same thing here. This is a boundary. I don't respond to work emails on the weekend. That's a boundary. You are stating clearly what you do or don't do. Your meeting with me is at 10:30. If you haven't arrived by that time and you haven't called, I will cancel the meeting. That is a boundary, right? We can do this for appointments with our clients, right? If you are more than 15 minutes late to your appointment and you have not called, the appointment will be considered canceled and you will be charged a $50 cancellation fee. That's a boundary. If you continue to raise your voice and curse at me, I will disconnect this call. Another example of a boundary for one of our client-facing team members. And no can also be a boundary. Okay? So the key takeaways for solution-focused coping are dealing with the root issue head-on, either by asking for help or by setting a boundary. Those are some examples of solution-focused coping. So I want to see some examples of how you would manage this in the chat. So you work in a busy practice. The practice has been understaffed for several months. You've repeatedly asked the practice manager to adjust scheduling so that team members aren't expected to work past closing time most days of the week. Several weeks in advance, you informed your supervisor in writing that you had an important event to attend with your family on Wednesday and would need to be out of the clinic by 6. You sent several reminders, and on Tuesday evening, when you look at the schedule, you see that a complex case has been put on your schedule for 5:45. It will not be feasible to see this patient and make it to your family event. Using a solution-focused strategy, what is your next step? So solution-focused, right? Do we ask for help? Do we set a boundary? Do we do both? What would you do in this situation? You're welcome to either take yourself off of mute or you can pop your thoughts into the chat. What are you going to do? I'm sure many of you have experienced this who are watching. Solution focused coping. What can you do? Anybody? Yeah, Andrea says the appointment will need to be rescheduled to another vet or another time. Perfect, right? See if a colleague can take the case, Shannon says. So we're asking for help, right? Can somebody else take this case? The boundary is I will not be able to see this patient because it is past the time that I need. It will go past the time that I need to be able to leave, right? So perfect example of solution-focused coping. Notice we're not getting angry and just going through with it and then being angry or, sending an angry, email to the practice manager saying, I told you repeatedly, blah, blah, blah. We've already said, we've already, made it clear. So now we set the boundary. This appointment will need to be moved so that I can leave on time, as previously mentioned in my emails. Teresa says, notify the practice manager that I will be able to see this case and it needs to be rescheduled. Beautiful. Excellent job, everybody. So in the time that we have left, I want to talk about emotion-focused coping. There's many, many different strategies that we can use for emotion-focused coping. And I want to hear from some of you in the chat. What do you do to calm your central nervous system when you feel that stress response kicking in, right? That fight, flight, freeze, and you know that you want to react, you want to shout, you want to shut down, you want to do something. What do you do for your emotional regulation? How do you calm your nervous system? These are emotion-focused coping strategies. I'm going to talk through a couple of them, but I want to see what you all use as emotion-focused coping strategies because there's lots of them. I know for me, especially as a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher, I use breathing exercises. That's a huge thing for me. Sometimes humming or singing can be helpful. Yep. So Lisa, same as me, says deep breaths, breathe. Lots of you are breathers. Yep. Of course, we're all breathers. Shannon says breathing exercises to lower the heart rate. So yeah, breath holding, prolonged exhales, those are going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and drop your heart rate. Candace, I love this. I have a jar of gummy bears and I eat one until I react. Rachel says count to 10, so pausing. Andrea says go for a walk if there's time. So lots of different ways that we can use emotion-focused coping strategies. These are ideally healthy strategies, right, that we can use to calm the central nervous system. So getting outdoors is really helpful. Moving your body is really helpful. Again, singing, breath work, dance parties, various other things to help regulate the central nervous system. I'm going to offer you two other things that we can also do as well. One is going to be reframing And the other is going to be a particular form of physical movement that actually has an impact on our brain processing. Okay. So I think everybody is aware of the very strong negativity bias that we have as human beings, right? We tend to throw the positive experiences out the window, right? Positive experiences just kind of roll off of us like Teflon. And it's the negative experiences that stick. Right. Again, in one of my coaching calls recently, we were talking about client complaints. And it's like, we have literally 98% amazing, amazing, amazing clients. And it's that 2% that just get under our skin, right? Why is that? Well, humans have evolutionarily created a negativity bias for their survival. Can you imagine if we were just all like rainbows and butterflies and unicorns all day long? We wouldn't see the threats and we would die, right? So that's why we have a tendency to focus on the negative in order to survive. But now that we don't have so many threats in our lives, this evolutionary, consequence has consequences for us. And I'm wondering, do you know how many positive experiences you need to recall to buffer or nullify a negative experience or thought? How many do you think? Yeah, Andrea says 5. Correct. So it is a 5-to-1 ratio. For every negative client experience we have, we need to really think about the 5 positive clients in order to nullify that. And I don't think many of us are doing that on a regular basis. So what we can do instead of trying to find this like 5-to-1 ratio is to just offer ourselves a reframe. This is looking at something from a different perspective, right? To counterbalance that negativity bias, right? Think about this, like you're looking at something and it looks blurry, and then you put your glasses on and it's like, oh, I'm seeing this in a whole new way. That is what a reframe is. We're taking a challenge or a perceived threat or a stressful situation, and we're trying to look at it in a positive light. Okay. So this is what we can do. This is an example of a reframing algorithm, right? Hear your negative talk, right? Excuse me, like, I can't believe, I'll go back to my moving example, like, oh my gosh, I hate moving. It's so stressful. Okay. That's just my voice talking to me. So the A is to acknowledge that I can challenge that negative talk. It doesn't have to be negative. So the reframe might be, you know what? Yes, moving is stressful, but this gives me an opportunity to really go through my things with a fine-tooth comb and maybe get rid of some stuff that I'm not using anymore. My daughter is 5. She's grown out of like the baby phase and the toddler phase. She's going to be starting school in the fall. So great opportunity to get rid of stuff, right? Lighten the load. And then T, talking compassionately about ourselves. Yeah, this is going to be hard. It's going to be stressful. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's good things that can come from this. Okay. So I'll use another example, which is a client. Imagine that a client says to you, if you really cared about animals, you wouldn't charge so much for your services, right? So what goes through our mind? I don't know about you, but for me, it's like, what a jerk. I'm so sick of people thinking we're in this for the money. Do they have any idea the sacrifices that I continue to make on a regular basis to do this work, right? How do we reframe that thought? I'd love to read your thoughts in the chat. How could you reframe what this client has said to you? If you really cared about animals, you wouldn't charge so much for your services. How do you look at that situation in a different way rather than judging and, reprimanding the client in your mind? Any thoughts? How could you look at that? Yeah, I love what Shannon has said. This person must be having a hard time, right? There's a great statement that actually comes from one of the other AVMA modules that says clients aren't giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time, right? Rachel says recognize that financial hardships have touched everyone at one point. Yeah, I love this. This is empathy in action, right? The client is concerned about their pet and they may be financially struggling, Lisa says. So the bottom line is the reframe. This isn't personal, right? Money, worries, and sick pets stress all of us out. Of course, this client is stressed, right? So we can have a little bit of empathy for them. We can take a step back, don't make it about you, recognize it's probably not about you, and that this client is struggling. That's the reframe. The second thing I mentioned is physical movement, but I want to be very specific that yes, we all have our physical movements we enjoy. I happen to love riding the stationary bike or doing strength training or hill work on the treadmill. We all have our likes. The research demonstrates that when it comes to mitigating stress, cross crawl exercises are phenomenal. Okay. This is where the opposite sides of the body work together to move. So we see this especially with walking, right? Where our arms are moving in opposition to our legs. Same thing with running. Same thing with swimming. Anything that crosses the midline of the body reboots the nervous system, discharges stress, and recharges energy, all of which lowers unhelpful reactivity. It fires up our prefrontal cortex, which therefore improves our impulse control. So if you want even just something that you could do during the day at work, this is Marcy Kirk. Some of you probably recognize her from the AVMA. So Marcy's demonstrating this cross-body exercise where you're literally bringing knee to opposite elbow, right? Just a few knee to opposite elbow is going to reprogram and help with the brain. You can also do a balancing pose, or even we often refer to this in yoga, right? As, oh my goodness, I'm having a brain fart. But you go into tabletop position, you extend your opposite arm and your opposite leg, and then you curl your knee and your elbow of opposite sides of the body together. Broken table. Thanks, Andrea. So balancing table, which is what Marcy is demonstrating, or broken table, where you bring your opposite arm and elbow and knee to touch and then go to the other side, if that works for you from a balance perspective. Again, you'll notice it takes concentration, but that getting you into your body and out of your head and just really integrating the left and the right side of the body has neurophysiologic benefits for mitigating stress and reactivity. So just a few easy things that you can do. So again, solution for key takeaways for emotion-focused coping are aimed at increasing your capacity to tend to your nervous system and decrease that unhelpful reactivity. And we don't need to do these mutually exclusively, right? So it's not either or, it can be both together. So along with the boundaries and the asking for help, we can also use the reframing and the cross-crawl physical movements, okay? Use and find what works for you. And again, a lot of you already shared some really great coping strategies as well. So we are at the top of our time now, so I'm going to wrap up by sharing with you some additional resources. If you haven't checked out all of the amazing resources that the AVMA has, I highly recommend it. Their workplace wellbeing certificate program is phenomenal. They also have their Brave Space certificate program. They have Journey for Teams now that's not, it's listed here at the end. Veterinary Hope Foundation is also a wonderful, wonderful organization that also offers free support groups that are moderated by a mental health professional for members of the veterinary team, including veterinarians, technicians, and other members of the team. So please feel welcome to check out that as well. Now, again, knowledge is only useful when it becomes a catalyst for change, and change requires application of information, not just collecting it. So take action moving forward. Notice what you can control during times of stress. Identify what triggers your reactivity and create a plan to buffer that reactivity, and make sure that you're implementing some of these healthy coping strategies. I'm happy for you to ask any questions that you might have in the chat. Otherwise, while you are formulating your questions, you can also either scan the QR code here, or you can put this jot form code into your into your browser, this is how you get your CE credit, okay? You're going to scan the QR, you're going to complete a survey, you need to name me the presenter, Marie Hollowaychuk. The location is virtual, okay? That is going to then, once complete, give you a prompt to download your CE certificate. That will mean that you do get a blank certificate that you fill out, but that will serve as your CE certificate for completing this webinar. Okay. Any questions, please do email me at speaking@revivingvetmed.com. Okay, so I would love for us to keep in touch. If you don't already follow me on social media, please do. If you have a question that you want to ask me just one-to-one, you can email me at the email addresses listed here. I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. I also have several videos and whatnot on YouTube, so you can follow me there. But really what I want you to do is to follow us on Reviving Veterinary Medicine. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will get webinar recordings, videos, shorts, and other resources all related to mental health and well-being. And if you visit our website, you will see there that we have one-on-one coaching, online programs, podcast episodes, blog posts, downloads that you can share with your team. Lots and lots and lots of resources. And I would love for us to stay in touch. So thank you so much. You're so welcome for everybody who's here and making comments in the chat. Again, I'll stay on for just a couple of moments here, but I wish you a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.